Welcome, everyone. Welcome, dear friends from the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, to this webinar with Selim Hussein about resilience in Bangladesh and how BRAC Bank has been helping to reshape Bangladesh's economy and support the financial sector. It's great to see you all arriving. I'm going to give it a few more minutes just to make sure everyone is in our webinar as people are arriving. And in the meantime, I will provide a little bit of context for this fireside chat. As a global network, our members are affected by global events. And often we hear about these global events in the media, but rarely do we really know the backstory and how banking on values is making a difference. Today, we want to hear about the revolution that has happened in Bangladesh last year in July and the role that BRAC Bank is having in reshaping the financial sector and therefore also the country's economy. I would like to give a very warm welcome to Selim Hussein. Selim, many of you know him. He's the managing director of BRAC Bank. And Selim has been a career banker for over 35 years. He has worked for very reputable and large institutions such as Standard & Chartered, ANC Grindlays. He was managing director at IDLLC Finance. And in 2015, he joined BRAC Bank as their managing director and CEO. What you might not know is that Selim also serves on several important boards, including the governing board of Association of Banks in Bangladesh. He's a member of the board of the SME Foundation, and he's also a board member of the Financial Alliance for Women. And of course, we all know him as the GABV board member for Asia Pacific. So Selim, once again, a very warm welcome. Thank you for being open to having this fireside chat and telling us a bit more about the revolution in Bangladesh. Before we dive into the conversation, for our participants, I would just like to ask you to put your questions into the chat. My colleague Alice Kunta, who is helping us with this call, will make sure that I don't miss any of your questions. I really do hope I do not. We will not have an open Q&A at the end, but we will make sure that we can have your questions responded to. Please also, it would be nice to indicate your name in the Zoom so we know who is on the call today. Now, with this, let's jump right in to the conversation. I deliberately called it a revolution that had happened in July in Bangladesh. Selim, why don't you tell us about the events in July, what happened then, and why did this happen?
Thanks, Martin. I will. Good evening to everybody across the globe. It's a pleasure to meet you and talk about once-in-a-lifetime event. What happened in July and August of 2024 was essentially that the country experienced a mass uprising driven by students and common people, by public discontent over a controversial recruitment, quota-based recruitment process that the government tried to put in place. The recruitment system faced a lot of criticism because it fostered a lot of nepotism and everybody felt it undermined meritocracy. And this led to widespread frustration amongst youngsters, students, and job seekers as well. The government then tried some limited reforms, but this also failed to address the demands for a comprehensive merit-based recruitment approach. And what happened was that protests escalated and they started including citizens from diverse backgrounds. And they started demanding much more than just reform in that government recruitment process. So this was we started seeing demands for political reform, demands for improved living conditions, demand for safe medical treatment, etc., etc. And instead of engaging in dialogue with these protesters, the government responded with armed reprisals, all of which exacerbated tensions. This led to a regime change, an absolute revolution. On August 5th, the previous regime, which was essentially a police state and had been in power for more than 15 years, suddenly toppled. And all of a sudden, we saw on August 5th, or actually August 6th, that there was a new Bangladesh, a Bangladesh 2.0, one that represented more hope, a more just and perhaps a more equitable society. It is something that we would not have believed possible, that we suddenly saw in front of our own eyes. So it was a once-in-a-lifetime event, Martin.
Selim, I'm trying to imagine how it must have felt at that time, because this took about 5 weeks, that revolution. And of course, like you said, no one would have expected it to turn out like that after 5 weeks. I mean, how did you personally feel during that time? And at what point did you realize that actually something else was going on, and that this is not just a short-lived uprising that is being squashed by the government, but that actually this change could happen? Did you expect something like that to
No,
turn?
I did not. The short answer is nobody believed that this kind of change would have been possible, that common students and common people on the streets, hundreds of thousands of them, could topple a government which had been in power for so long. A very autocratic, a very dictatorial government. And until the former head of the government actually got on a helicopter and flew out of Bangladesh into India, until that moment, I did not believe that this would have been possible. So I actually moved out of my own home on August 3rd because we felt that it was a bit insecure. And I stayed with some relatives, and this was a 10-story building. So I often on the 4th and 5th, we went up to the rooftops and could see what was happening on the main streets below. And it was quite incredible. So it was a very difficult time, those 2 or 3 weeks leading up to August 5th, a time filled with uncertainty, a lot of anxiety. And in the end, when it happened, it was it was delirious. People were out on the streets. Even I came out on the streets with my wife, and we walked a short for a few hundred meters, but it was incredible. The feeling of euphoria across Dhaka was unbelievable. And when you saw the commitment, the unity, the feeling of people on the street, I don't know if I will ever see anything like that again in this country. And
it must have been incredibly impressive, because I remember seeing pictures of hundreds of thousands of people in the streets.
Yes.
And I just couldn't imagine the energy that was out there. It must have been just incredible.
Absolutely. I am not able to communicate that moment to you properly. I do not have the right words. But it was just unbelievable. I could not believe that young people could get together and do something like this. So that is essentially, my mind goes back to the Arab Spring. Some of you may remember about 10, 15 years ago, 2010, 2011. So this was the Bangladesh's Arab Spring equivalent, a monsoon spring or a monsoon uprising of sorts. So it was just unbelievable, quite unbelievable.
So, so what happened on the 6th of August? What happened then? How did the story of continue?
So what happened then was that an interim government was put in place by the students and the army as well. And the interim government head was a very popular person, Dr. Yunus, Professor Yunus, a man who had received the Nobel Prize about 10, 15, or 20 years ago, something like that, for his work with Grameen Bank, a microfinance institution. And he is very well established, recognized, respected, not just in Bangladesh, but generally speaking across the world. But he is also somebody that had been indicted by the previous government. And he is somebody who was literally ready to go to jail in a few days' time, and was probably going to jail forever for his entire remainder of his life. He's in his 80s, but I don't think he would have expected to ever come out of jail after many, many years of legal cases and different kinds of indictments and et cetera, et cetera. And then in a few days' time, he actually became head of the government. So this interim government took many different initiatives to promote initially inclusivity and recovery in the entire nation. They began engaging in pretty meaningful dialogues, initiating discussions with various stakeholders, including young students, most of them below the age of 25, community leaders, civil society, et cetera, and they began rolling out different reforms in different areas. I think 6 or 7 different areas over the next month or so. But they put together a very different kind of government, an interim government where the government officials were, or senior officials were, non-politicians or non-bureaucrats, but generally speaking, honest people who most people recognize as being leaders, community leaders. So that's how things started initially. Yes.
So you mentioned that it's an interim government. Is the interim determined? How long is this interim, and what is the expectation? What will happen after the interim government?
So, Martin, the sense is that there will be formal elections in the first quarter of 2026. But between now and then, there is a lot of reform that's going on. For example, I can tell you that there's a lot of reform in the banking sector. There's been reform in the law enforcement area sector. There's reform in education, reform in government elections, in the administration, et cetera. Many different areas, different reform initiatives have started. And a lot of what we would call white paper or white paper on different parts of the economy, different areas to come up with. For example, the power sector is a very important sector in Bangladesh, and there's a lot of focus in that area. In the banking sector, in administrative reform, in the overall macroeconomy, so many different kinds of reform verticals, shall I call it, or the word they use is reform commissions, actually.
So, and are you optimistic? Because before we started this call, you were telling me it is hard for the new government to take important decisions because they are not an elected government. So
Yes.
there's still a bit of a question around how legitimate are they to take politically directed decisions to bring the country forward. And at the same time, I think no one doubts that those reforms are necessary. How do you balance that tension?
It's a big challenge because the first thing that has happened, effectively for 15, 16 years, Martin, we have lived in this country in what I would call a police state, where there was little or no freedom of speech whatsoever. The dictators, the despots found ways to keep the all 170, 180 million people. I don't know exactly how many people there are in this country, but everybody was under the yoke of this government. And overnight, there is freedom of speech, freedom to talk, freedom to write, and freedom to demand. So every constituency in the country is today demanding something or other. The rickshaw pullers are demanding this. The students are demanding something else. The administration is demanding something else. Some people want more terminal benefits. Other people want more increased salaries. Other people want this, that. It's the number of demands that we see every day, new demands, is laughable. But it is because for 15 years, people were not able to ask for anything, were not able to demand anything. So that's the change. Naturally, there is a lot of chaos. A lot of the chaos has stabilized in that things have normalized as well over the last 5 months. It's a lot better than, say, August, September, October. And a lot of the economic fundamentals, the metrics, have also improved significantly. The exchange rate has stabilized. A lot of new and improved, streamlined regulations have been rolled out by the central bank. The balance of payment has improved significantly. And we're also, for example, I'm talking about the banking sector more, but we've started seeing international correspondent banks relax their correspondent bank limits on the country as well. So that is helping to slowly speed up the economy. While the overall sense is that Bangladesh will grow at about 4% in 2024, that is still a lot better than what many people expected. It's not a recession, so that is very positive. And the government has taken a lot of very decisive steps towards, comprehensive electoral reforms, social welfare programs, healthcare, education, employment. A lot of things are happening. It's taking a bit of time, but everybody recognizes that the size of the challenge is very, very large.
It sounds like mission impossible, at least from where I sit. Managing those expectations that are being raised, not disappointing anyone, and making sure that the next legitimately elected government can hit the ground running. That will be a big challenge.
Yes.
But let's hear how BRAC Bank is involved in all of this. I think your role being on the board of the Bankers Association in Bangladesh, of course, also meant that you and probably other senior bankers in the country have an important role to play. Maybe let's dial back a little bit. During this time of upheaval and during these past 4 or 5 months, how has BRAC Bank performed, and how did you see anything change? Has anything changed for BRAC Bank? Has it been more difficult for the bank? What's the situation?
So, yeah, Martin, firstly, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been doing very well, growing 20-25% year on year, despite an environment in which banks like us were significantly disadvantaged, and deliberately so, in terms of the regulatory environment. So it wasn't a level playing field. That changed from August onwards. And despite the uprising and the chaos that began as well, you'll be surprised to know that we grew even more stronger. The last 5 months have been the best 5 months that BRAC Bank has experienced in financial terms, in terms of numbers of customers, in terms of growth of deposits and loans in its last 24 years. To give you a sense, year ending 31st, 2024, the market on average grew deposits and loans both by roughly 7%. BRAC Bank's deposits grew by 35%.
Wow.
Our loans grew by 20%. And we have ended up, while it is still a price-sensitive piece of information, we have ended up with the highest ever profits that the bank has ever earned. And we will be, of course, publicly announcing all this in March. But at this point in time, I can tell you it was an extraordinary 5 months. We are clearly seeing what we would call a flight to safety or a flight to quality, as customers from all segments, from SME, from retail, from corporate or wholesale, are quickly recognizing that if they are to grow in the future, then they need to partner a more sustainable bank. And there is no more sustainable bank in this country than BRAC Bank. So while immediately 10 banks became bankrupt from August 5th onwards, and the entire banking industry of about 60 odd banks experienced significant liquidity challenges in terms of both local currency and foreign currency. BRAC Bank has been steaming full steam ahead. We've been adding customers from all segments, and it's been an incredible journey. Just to give you a sense, about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we would onboard about 10 to 15,000 customers per month. The month of December, we onboarded over 50,000 customers. So just to give you a sense of the
Amazing.
momentum, we are already the second or maybe the third largest private sector bank in the country. And we, 2 weeks ago, we had an offsite strategy session where management and the board agreed to a 3-year aspiration to become the largest bank, private sector bank in this country in between 4 to 5 years. So that will give you a sense of the optimism that we feel in BRAC Bank, and also the potential, because more and more customers are now gravitating towards BRAC Bank.
Yeah. Selim, I think that's it's an amazing story, and it's really exciting to hear that. And I think it's also immediately calls to me also the question: how do you manage that growth and make sure you can maintain the culture, because you must be also onboarding a lot of new staff members.
Yes.
But maybe before we go there, or maybe it's a topic that we need to explore during the annual meeting, let's go back to the revolution in Bangladesh. So BRAC Bank now finds itself in the middle of this revolution. A new regime comes in. Where do you think, or first of all, where are you involved? In what areas of change is BRAC Bank being solicited? And also, how do you see the role? What's your aspiration? What do you want? What's the change you want to see as a values-based bank in Bangladesh?
For a start, we want a different kind of financial sector. We need a radical transformation. We want a truly inclusive financial sector, one that, for example, offers access to credit and financial services to customers of all segments, wholesale, corporate and institutions, retail, consumer finance, but also SME, and even going further below to lower levels, cottage and micro as well, to lower income communities, to women, to small businesses everywhere. We'd like to see a shift towards more sustainable business banking practices, ones that are more reflect our values. For example, banking practices that also reflect social and environmental impacts. Those are very important to countries such as ourselves. And BRAC Bank is ideally positioned, Martin, to be able to offer advice, feedback, support to the banking regulator in all these areas. I think what we do, what we stand for, is a role model to everybody else in this country, not only in the kinds of business we do, but the way we do business. That is well recognized, and that is why we are growing so fast right now. And of course, the central bank, I should mention that even the governor now happened to be the chairman of BRAC Bank. He was the chairman of BRAC Bank from 2019 to 2023, or maybe end 23. So he's also somebody that we know very well, and he does not hesitate to lean on the bank or myself or our chairperson, our board, our resources for different kinds of feedback and advice. As I told you, there are three verticals in this country right now in terms of the banking sector reform. First is asset quality review to determine the size of the real hole in the banking sector. The second one is a strengthening of the central bank. And the third is a possible recovery of stolen assets. So he is borrowing heavily from all the good banks in this country in terms of ideas. And of course, BRAC Bank is one of them.
Yeah. So you mentioned 10 banks went under very quickly after the revolution. You gave us a picture of where you see the banking sector heading. I presume that those 10 banks were not exactly operating in that space where you would like to see the banks. Can you give our participants a sense of how the financial sector in Bangladesh is structured? Also, we heard BRAC Bank is poised to become the second or actually the largest bank in Bangladesh. So that comes, of course, with a lot of responsibility as well. Do you see any risks in that?
Obviously, for a start, let me give you a sense of the banking sector. It is very fractured and very diverse. So the 10 banks that I referred to were banks that were owned by a particular comrade of the then prime minister, and actually represented close to 20% of the entire banking sector. So you can imagine the turmoil, the stress that the banking sector has been if 20% of your banks turn belly up. Then you can imagine the stress on customers who are not able to withdraw their deposits and so on. So that is very significant. So 60 banks, I would suggest that 30 odd banks or maybe 40 odd banks are in various stages of between weak to satisfactory. And there are about 10 good or much better banks as well. But there are significant challenges for the government, for the banking regulator as well. They have started implementing international standard regulations and practices. For example, debt provisioning, international accounting standards, capital adequacy standards, etc., are being rolled out in phases from March 25 onwards. So it's a humongous task, and it will cause a lot of stress over the next couple of years at least, I would suggest. But one has to start moving away from these very archaic and very locally tailored regulations that supported a lot of the corruption and irregularity that prevailed in the banking sector pre-August.
You had mentioned that you're already seeing also the economic situation of Bangladesh improve at the international front. So the exchange rate,
I
an
should
opening.
I should mention, Martin, that the government has received a lot of support from different other governments as well. Europe, the US, China, the present head of the government, Dr. Professor Yunus, has incredible network and is highly respected across many different countries of the world. Many government leaders know him very well and respect him for what he has done over the last 30 or 40 years. He's received many different awards, not just the Nobel Peace Prize, but many other awards as well from across the globe. So they have been able to get a lot of budgetary and other financial support from the multilaterals such as the World Bank, the IMF, etc., but also other governments as well. Many governments have committed support in terms of the asset recovery initiative, legal support and other intelligence gathering support, etc. So this has been very positive as well. Very importantly, there is in government much more transparency than there was earlier, as a result of which everything, contracts, for example, with different vendors, they could be very large power vendors, different countries, are all now being reviewed for as to whether these stand the light of day, whether the different clauses in all these various contracts and arrangements are good for the country and have been well governed, well arranged, well set up.
Then we're getting a couple of questions in the chat, and I would like to invite our participants in the chat to ask more questions. Always happy to take them up. So we have a question here from São Paulo, from Daniel Araujo, and he is asking, to what do you credit the robustness and increase in the number of clients of BRAC Bank at a time when other banks have gone bankrupt?
Well, for a start, I work here.
That's a strong argument. You can't say anything against.
But essentially, we have over the last 10 years, Martin, you know in particular how we've really built this bank, taken it forward. I'd just like to say that 10 years ago, when I joined this bank, we were number 16 or 17 in the industry. Today, almost every financial metric in terms, profits, cost-income ratio, return on asset, return on equity, international credit ratings, central bank camel ratings, we are number one in everything. The only thing that we lack now, we're roughly 4% of the market. We should be 8 to 9% of the market in 4 years' time. That's a plan. We should actually be close to 10% in 4. If we keep on growing at the present rate, let me put it that way, we will be 10% in 4 to 5 years' time, and we will be the largest private sector bank in this country. The opportunities for us are immense. So yes, the growth, as you mentioned earlier, also brings challenges, but we have put together a plan to step up and rebuild and reset our infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean people first, technology, premises, and processes. So that's our infrastructure. We've stepped investment in all these areas. For example, this year we plan to recruit close to 1,600 new co-workers. That will give you a sense
Impressive.
of how we're trying to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So enormous opportunity, great potential, but the strength of BRAC Bank has been our focus on governance, on transparency, on compliance, and the values that we share with our friends in the GABV. I've always said, Martin, that the GABV has provided us with a North Star. It has helped direct us, guide us, shape this bank into what it is today. We have benefited enormously by being part of the GABV. We've learned a lot. So everything that we do in some way, shape, or form actually reflects what the GABV is all about. I think it's our values more than anything else that have strengthened and built this bank over the last 10 years. It's those values that have made us the most sustainable bank in the country. And we have actually been awarded the most successful bank by the central bank for the last 4 years.
That's really amazing, and thank you for the praise of the GABV. I would say the GABV has also benefited a lot of the knowledge, the experience, and the wisdom of BRAC Bank. So I think it's really being together as partners that made all the difference. Speaking of the values, Wouter van Bezien van Wedeka Bank asks, did BRAC Bank make public statements about the political situation or about the revolution at some point? Did you?
No,
No.
no. We have a policy of not making any political statement at all, political or religious.
Yeah, yeah. I think.
But let me also say that we spent a lot of money in helping rehabilitating students who were injured or shot by the police and the army. So we spent a lot of money supporting the hospitals,
Yeah.
sponsoring the hospitals in providing healthcare to these students.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we did not make any public statement as such.
Yeah. I can imagine in a country like Bangladesh where the situation can be very volatile, you have to be very careful making any type of political statement, and you have to operate behind the scenes, just as you explained before.
Absolutely. In fact, that is the way we do things at BRAC Bank.
Yeah. So here is another question coming from Nick Heron. He's the CEO of CD in France. He says, he enjoys the discussion. He's worked in Bangladesh in 1978 and 79, so he knows the situation, or at least Bangladesh, quite well, but from a different time. And he is asking, you draw a comparison with the Arab Spring, but those springs ended often in quite difficult autumns, if not even a winter. How will Bangladesh fare? What role for us at the GABV and for GABV banks?
For a start, we are cautiously optimistic, Martin. I cannot confirm anything that this is going to happen, that is going to happen. But what I can tell you is there is freedom in this country. Mm-hmm. I am able to say what I just said for the last half an hour or so. Mm-hmm. I can say what I feel. I can go out in the streets and say what I feel. I think that is worth something. I think that there is a wave of transparency, of freedom, of governance that is coming through this country. Maybe the pace may be a little slow compared to many other, say, Western countries, but it has started. That is very positive for us. Also, at the same time, there is a clear indication that this country does not want to be a vassal state of any other country. Mm-hmm. I will not explain that statement in full. I'm sure some of you will be able to understand what I am referring to. But the people of this country want to remain free, free of all kinds of enslavement, both local and international. Now, how that will pan out, whether it will turn into a winter or an autumn, I do not know. But I am cautiously optimistic. And I'm very, very proud of the incredible sacrifice made by so many young people. Over 800 people have been identified as having been killed by the law enforcement and the political party in the 3 weeks to running up to August 5th. Many thousands have been injured badly. Many have lost their vision. Many have had arms or legs amputated. I cannot tell you how proud I am that these young people came out on the streets and did all that. Now, is this going to result in a better Bangladesh? I certainly believe so. I'm generally speaking a cynic, but what I saw on August 5th was something that that made me very proud of this country and the young people of this country. So let's see how it goes. For somebody who, like myself, I'm about what, a year, 15 months away from my own retirement. I have decided that in my own small way, I will contribute to these various reforms by helping as much as I can the regulator, and at the same time, by continuously growing this bank, BRAC Bank, where we work, and making it a role model for everybody. Importantly, by continuing to serve all our customers, Martin, in all segments, particularly the underserved customers, by doing business the right way, by doing the right kinds of business, I think we contribute to this country, the economy of the country, our people, very, very strongly. We have, as I said 2 weeks ago, we had an offsite strategy session, and we decided on a very simple vision for the next 4 or 5 years. And our vision is to become the largest private sector bank in this country and also the most socially impactful. So I am cautiously optimistic, and
I like it.
Small way, we are going to make a contribution.
Yeah. I'm very encouraged by your optimism, Selim, and I think also your vision is fantastic, not just to be the largest bank, but the most socially impactful bank. And I think that that's a good segue to another question I received from Mir Sofar from Investment Credit Bank in Tajikistan. He's asking, usually in countries with difficult regimes, the ordinary people's impression on large, successful institutions is that they are related to the regime. Was that the case with BRAC Bank? If not, how did you manage to avoid such an impression?
So for a start, we are part of the BRAC family, which is the largest NGO or development organization in the world, one that's been in place since 1971, over 50 years now, and a brand that is well recognized across the country as being apolitical, having very strong values. It is one of the most, if not the most respected corporate brand in this country. So we were never associated with the regime. And we've been able to stay away from that for a long, long time. We have operated, as I've been continuously emphasizing, in a different way from many of the other banks. We did not take any of the benefits of the regime. So we are, and the way we operate in terms of serving underserved cottage, micro, small, and medium customers in particular, the public recognizes that we have nothing to do with those politicians and those corrupt bureaucrats and regulators. So that wasn't a challenge for us. We've been different from many, many years. It's just that right now, with a regulatory playing field, a level playing field, it's even easier for people to see that this is the bank that I or you should partner.
Yeah. Which explains why you're onboarding 50,000 clients in just 1 month and people are drawn to your bank. That's a really amazing story. We're almost nearing the end of our fireside chat, and maybe just as an outlook towards the GABV annual meeting in Kampala, which is happening in March, where we will be exploring resilience. What is it that we can learn from BRAC Bank and the events in Bangladesh about resilience? Where do you see the major lessons?
It has been a very difficult time. The last 10 years that I've been in this bank, for example, for us to operate in a different way, shall I say, from many other banks in this country, for us to be squeaky clean, for us to have very strong values, for us to not engage in corrupt practices, and still operate profitably, operate well, operate in line with our overall vision. It's been very difficult, but very satisfying. And we can see the benefits now, Martin, where the rest of the banking industry are floundering. Many banks are still suffering from liquidity, foreign exchange and local currency liquidity crises, reputational crises, many different kinds of challenges. We are able to grow at 3, 4, 5 times the market growth rate. So that can give you a sense of just how strong our bank is. Yes, as we continue to grow at 25, 30, 35%, there are many new challenges. For example, information security, cyber security challenges. Can we continue to grow in this manner and manage our AML or anti-money laundering controls in the right way? Can we continue to improve our customer experience for all customer segments, and not just get bogged down with the volumes of business that are starting to flow into the bank? So there are many challenges, but these are positive and welcome challenges. And we are ideally positioned to really respond to these challenges. One of the strengths of our bank, Martin, in response to that particular question, is that we have always been a very agile institution, able to respond to the chaos in the environment outside, and it is always a chaos. But we respond, we collaborate well within ourselves. We have a strong team, a great team of almost 12,000 co-workers. People are very committed, very hardworking. They believe in the overall vision of the institution, and they believe in the good that we contribute to society and economy in this country.
Selim, I could go on talking to you for a very long time, but we are now slowly reaching the end of our fireside chat. I would like to, first of all, express my gratitude that you are here with us. You're at the moment super busy with all the changes that are happening. I'd like to congratulate you once again for what you have achieved, what you and your team have achieved. And I can only wish you and all of BRAC Bank continued success in helping to transform your country. It's great to see this. I'm just getting here another message. Let me just read this here. So Dwayne Naylor writes, Selim, thank you for creating a culture of love and for sharing your story with our members. When you hosted the GABV, the passion and love of your staff demonstrated what we could accomplish in our banks. BRAC Bank and your leadership has had a transformational impact on our organization. Thank you for this. So I think you see, many of us are also grateful to everything you have done for us at the GABV. I really look forward to seeing you in Kampala. I'd like to recall to everyone on the call that the annual meeting is coming up soon. It's happening from the 11th to the 13th of March. If you haven't registered yet, please do so. Please make sure you apply for your visa and reserve your hotel room in time. So you will find all this information on the community space. I'd also like to highlight before we close that before the annual meeting, there will be a small delegation of CEOs that will be going to Ethiopia to meet with the central bank governor there and also to visit Project Mercy. This is being organized together with Priscilla Sims-Brown, the CEO of Amalgamated Bank. So if you have an interest in joining that trip, also please reach out to us and let us know. So with that, once again, Selim, thanks a lot for being here. It's been great and all the best and safe travels. Looking forward to seeing you soon in Kampala.
Thank you. Thank you, dear friends.
And thank you to all of our participants.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night. Thank you, Selim. Good night.